biodiesel space, the more I looked, the more impressed I was. In fact, started to really become amazed at the numbers. And so I immersed myself by, using Springboard to get into the biodiesel processor space. And so now I find myself grappling with a number of issues that other industries have seen at the front end of a big growth curve. And those issues are all about change. And yes.
Are you more into the business of selling biodiesel equipment or to sell the biodiesel itself?
That's a great question. Our processors allow individual small businesses, schools, to make biodiesel fuel in 40, 50, 100-gallon batches. So we are an enabler of biodiesel.
Is there methanol recovery with that?
Not now. Not currently.
When you say you're astounded by the numbers, what do you mean by that? Oh, I am not just straight.
I got some numbers. This isn't necessarily the numbers, but if you look at what's happening with anything commodity related, obviously, unless you've been under a rock, prices are going up. I saw on the 13th, CNN had this huge banner. Diesel hits record prices, gas ticks higher. If you look here at January '07 to right now, basically crude oil increased 218%. The conspiracy theorist in me makes me sort of wonder why that is, what's so different in those 18 months. But diesel obviously has been tracking that, and I can understand. I feel a sense of frustration and awkward wonder when I drive around and look at the prices on the pumps and wonder how we're going to work through this. And that's why every problem has an opportunity. And if you look at the blue line, this is what it costs to make a gallon of biodiesel fuel using a BioPro processor. Again, a little bit of an ad, but if you can get recycled vegetable oil for free, you're spending $1.12 versus $5.25 in San Francisco recently.
What's the flat rate on methanol with that?
$4.70, which is a little bit more than the last barrel of a drum of methanol we got.
55-gallon drum?
55.
Okay, thanks.
So there's a little commercial. I mean, the reason I got into this, as I said before, was because I was approaching from an environmental perspective. I will tell you that having been on the job for a little less than 90 days, I think 99.9% of our customers are happy there's an environmental benefit, but are really getting into this for purely economic reasons. Most of our customers are small businesses that have a bunch of trucks that they're driving all the time, and they are getting crushed by fuel prices. We're committed as a company to providing products and technologies that are both environmentally and economically beneficial. And again, I personally believe that that's essential to move an alternative energy space forward, because many people are unable to grasp timelines that climate change takes place over. So you can nod your head and say, yeah, climate change is happening, but I'm not necessarily going to pay another $1 to stop it happening 20 years from now. Today, you can go out and make biodiesel fuel for $1.12 or whatever your recycled vegetable oil costs on top of that, and you're making money and doing well. So we are committed to continue to try and innovate products in the biodiesel space that will enable people to make biodiesel fuel at a reasonable cost. And these are our products, to your question. We've got a 40-gallon, a 50-gallon, and a 100-gallon. We emphasize the way these are built, the fact that they are very automated. A lot of our customers are former seed users who maybe are burnt out, spending a lot of time in the garage and want to just press a button and go away. And then, of course, we've got a lot of small businesses who just want to get fuel for cheaper.
How do you know if you can meet that ASTM grade?
Well, we test it quite a bit. In other words, we test it on all our machines. The recipe that we suggest you use in our machines makes...
And the end result, though, how would I know to get that grade?
You'd have to get it tested.
I'd have to send
What
it
I'm
out.
telling you is that these will make it.
No, I know that would happen, but
You would have
for
to...
me to resell it, I would need that stamp of
Yes,
approval.
yes.
How does that occur?
You would have to have it you want to sell it commercially?
Yeah.
Send them to the
Go
lab.
to the ASTM.
I send off the lab, and
Get
that's all I need, just that stamp of approval for
Not
that.
from me.
No,
But
from
from the
from them.
Yeah.
You send it off to a lab, you get a report back that you passed it, then you send that to the EPA. The EPA says Omni Domini. Then
Yeah.
you have to join NBB to be able to sell it. That costs you anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 a year to do. Yeah, there's a couple of hoops you gotta jump through to be able to legally sell it.
And then how often do I have to be tested?
You don't have to be retested unless you do a major change to your production process.
Okay.
So it's not like you change feedstocks, you gotta do it all over again or anything like that.
So there's probably a local regulatory agency
And then there's
that's
a-
different.
the
It's
state-
done the federal process, but it's a local agency.
That's the federal process. Then your local state piece there, and then you gotta also get up to speed in federal excise taxes and become a fuel
Yeah,
seller.
sorry.
Are you guys working on anything
But
bigger
you have
than
to file
100
quarterly
Yeah.
reports to the IRS.
And in what time frame is that 100 gallons?
Yeah, I just did some quick math on this. You're saying 100-gallon BioPro 3800, 48-hour turnover, 17,000 gallons a year. Is that its window? I'm putting in like 10, 14 days downtime.
Yep.
So that's well under the radar of 60,000 gallons, at least here in Denver for commercial
Yeah.
purposes.
No, definitely.
What are you doing? Are you planning anything for methanol recovery? Or are you planning anything for 500-gallon batches? Or something around that, 300-gallon batches?
So we just announced Tuesday.
My turn?
Yeah, you
Something called a,
Okay, you're next.
something that we have,
Straight guy.
we've poetically called the SB 100. This is basically a dry wash. This does not do methanol recovery yet. That would be sort of probably version 2. This is not available for sale yet. It's hardware vaporware, but it will be out. We hope it will be out there in about less than 2 months. We've done
PLC
tests
control.
on it.
Price,
To be determined. Right now, it's about $1 million.
it's sub 10,000?
Yeah, we definitely want it to be sub 10,000.
Okay.
And this will allow us to double the, throughput of all of our processors. So to your point, you'll now get 34,000.
Thank you.
But it's still not, we're not at 500 today.
No, but actually with 12 hours, that's tripling or quadrupling.
And then one last little commercial point. Do you think so?
Well, do you need volunteers to bear that?
We haven't yet.
Just, check.
Sarah, you're behind me in line.
We've developed something that's sort of interesting that we call forced glycerin precipitation. This may actually, and what it does is it basically allows us to just push the glycerin out of the raw biodiesel fuel very quickly. So generally in the BioPro, we rely on gravity. With this, we may well be able to accelerate that by a significant factor, which would allow us to do more than double the throughput. Maybe sort of 2.5. Hold on, guy behind
Okay. Two things. So I say you've integrated a column. You're using a resin. Have you tested with other resins? Or
me. We've only tested it with the Pure Light.
okay.
That's the best.
And well, okay.
Small
Depends on what you're doing, right? And finally, when you're looking at warranting, I'm imagining that you're warranting under those conditions, and because of that, do I have to buy my Pure Light from your company? Is that the plan?
No, you don't have to buy the Pure Light from us.
Okay.
We'll sell it to you, but we
Of course. So you may have a better price.
So that's on the come, and I've heard from a lot of people they'd like that tomorrow, and I've told people internally that we'd like to deliver that tomorrow. So that's the commercial.
Your target still is a swoop low end then, under the radar people.
Well, yeah, but I think that as long, my point is, and maybe that's a segue to this graph. I mean, this is what we would call the S curve, right? So you look at where the industry is. I would suggest that we are right above the L in early adopters, and we are getting a lot of calls. I'm sure every other person who's making processors is getting a lot of calls, and I can envision a time 1 to 2 years out where you've got quite a few of these things on the ground, and that will create a number of corollary challenges for the industry. But one of the things it will do is it will attract a lot of attention. And so as we ride this curve, and as things change pretty dramatically and things are fairly fluid, I think the small scale processor market will be a pretty attractive market, and as I'll try and point out in a few slides here, it'll be worthy of regulators and politicians and local governments taking a look at what do we do with this, how do we manage it, and my suggestion is that we proactively tell them how to manage it.
Yeah. California.
California, we'll probably be getting most of the things. We'll be the test case, I think, on most of these issues.
Yeah.
So, you said staggering numbers, how many diesel engines? Well, as somebody who was not that familiar with the whole biodiesel space, the U.S. used 40 billion gallons of diesel last year. We are just microscopic entity in the marketplace for global diesel engines. As the world steams towards 1 billion cars, by 2020, diesel technology, which is getting better, is going to start expanding out, not only in this country, but certainly in Europe and in Asia, non-Japan Asia. And if you think about the emerging middle class in places like India and China, those guys are all going to buy a lot of cars, and a bigger percentage are going to be diesel. And so, given that, I think biodiesel in general will be a vital piece of the alternative sustainable energy portfolio.
But, I mean, the amount of vegetable oil that's available is
Not enough.
significant.
Right.
compared to-
Well, and that brings up the curve that you talked about initially, because I understand, went to business school. I understand that would be a traditional curve, except that we have, even in virgin oil, supply limitations. And so normally when you look at that curve, you're looking at unfettered supply in some area in the beginning, right?
Or you're starting from a really small base,
Absolutely.
which is what I would say we're doing now.
So there would really maybe be two curves that you'd be looking at if you look at the industry as a whole. The guys who started, they've got bigger plants out there, some of the plants are closing, and they look like they're actually at the end of that cycle, where they're some of them are collapsing.
Right, because of commodity prices right now.
Right, okay.
Exactly. So here you can see, this is from, I think, biodiesel.org. The 3.3 billion gallons of total biodiesel capacity out there, and in 08 projected, and we're going to be using 20% at best. And of that, recycled vegetable oil is probably going to be 10%.
What are the different curves, sorry?
Sorry, this is capacity, this is usage of biodiesel in the U.S.
Yeah, if we washed all of our diesel with maybe 2%,
Yeah.
that would work.
Yeah.
So,
So you got to start somewhere. I am not here to tell you biodiesel is going to solve
I'm just
all the
saying
problems in
that's-
the world. I just think it's an important piece of a puzzle, and it's going to get bigger than it is now. And as it gets bigger, more people will try to manage it for us.
Yeah.
your BioPro and the incoming stealth machine that I just saw, can they run animal tallow?
Yes.
So if I found, let's say, a beef shredder that was trying to get rid of fat, I could actually use that
Yes.
machine?
You want to test to make sure it met. I think, as I understand it, there are different acidic qualities for different tallow, if it comes from beef, pig, chicken, whatever. So you definitely want to measure it, but we have people who are currently making biodiesel fuel out of animal fat.
In a BioPro?
In BioPro.
Okay, beautiful.
And again, to this point, we're starting to, this industry, and again, this is biodiesel, the big picture, this is soybean oil, this is every part of the biodiesel picture, but money, jobs, revenues, again, attention. And we're just 10% of world production. So I had read that 90% of this is supposed to come from virgin oils. So the question is the other 10% recycled vegetable oil?
It's still a huge amount.
It's a big number. It's a big number. So at the risk of being obvious, this is what people who are in the larger global biodiesel marketing and analysis industry talk about. Here are the drivers. Government mandates, tax incentives, national security, environmental security, economic, energy independence. Well, my question is, well, what about profitability? If you can get people to do something that is good from any of these other 6 things, and it makes them money, you're going to accelerate the adoption curve dramatically. And that's what recycled vegetable oil, which I call RVAL. Biodiesel processed from recycled vegetable oils and other waste streams. Right now, and I'm open to comment, to me is the most compelling alternative energy available today. It's a small space, but again, people are making money and they are positively impacting environmental, national security, and economic security. Solar, wind, geothermal, ocean, other future technologies, these are all critical, but they have not yet reached petroleum parity. And so they have a much harder slog to get there. Most of these will be bigger,
Wait.
obviously.
Excuse me one second, where $5 to $6 a gallon of biodiesel produced from
Soy,
from soy?
sold in a pump, you know.
That reason.
Is it even a virgin oil?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
of course, super.
yeah. And it's amazing, I called a few people last week to see what they're selling biodiesel for. And I got $4.95, $5.15, and $5.95, all within 30 miles in the Bay Area. So I would argue the recipe for success is proven, and so now we can assure ourselves of some new and improved scrutiny. So before I get to the scrutiny, what is phenomenal is just the invisible inflation, which until about a month ago, most of our government policy wanks were saying that there really wasn't inflation. And if you look at these curves, it's amazing. And the virgin biodiesel industry, that's why we've got all these huge commercial plants shuttered, because they cannot use soybean oil commercially. I did the calculation, I think it costs $200 a barrel for soybean oil right now. So you need a lot of government intervention to make that even comparable to regular diesel. And the math of opportunity. So if you assume that there are 300 to 500 million gallons of recycled vegetable oil available, and then the animal fats, not all of these 300 to 500 million are usable certainly by a biopro, but they can, much of them can be rendered down into biodiesel fuel in some way, shape, or form. You've got billions in savings, and you know, if you want to go crazy, you can even talk about the implied carbon credit value of replacing 1 billion gallons of diesel, and that's worth almost $250 million. So in this country, money talks. I think this is an industry that can say, hey, we're creating a lot of money, so you should listen to us talk, so long as we have the right thing to say. So the Four Horsemen are coming. And again, I see this quite a bit, and I'm in a good position to field all kinds of crazy things that are happening across the country. We have biopros in probably every state in the union, so I get a sense of what's going on where, and I'm sure some of my dealers can also add into this. But from a perception perspective, every time you turn on the radio, biodiesel is getting lumped in with this thing called biofuels, and biofuels now are bad. They're bad because you're feeding SUVs at the expense of people. I saw this in Scientific American. By displacing agriculture for food and causing more land clearing, biofuels are bad for hungry people and the environment. There may be some validity to that argument, but it's not an extreme answer one way or the other, I would argue. But from the perspective of the biopro user, the recycled vegetable oil and animal waste stream user, we are taking a waste stream and turning it into a or a less polluting energy unit. That's a good thing. We should tell people about that. We should not allow this this subsegment of the market to be lumped into biofuels. So I'm constantly and probably obnoxiously correcting people saying that we are recycled vegetable oil biodiesel producers. And you know, commodity inflation is not helping that argument. So I went through the exercise more for myself, I guess, but just looking at, you know, ethanol, biodiesel virgin oils, then our space, and then algae, which is getting a lot more focus now, which I think is great. I just mentioned that if you tried to make algae biodiesel in a BioPro 190, I think I'd have to price that BioPro 190 a little over $100,000. So it's not commercially viable right now, but it will probably, I'm sure we'll get
Why
there.
are you saying that? You're saying it would be more?
Because you can't get enough density You need a lot more surface area density, and you can't make a personal processor right now with the technology that's available. That's what I've been told by some of the people who are running down that path.
TAM, technical account management?
Total available market, sorry. Sorry, yeah. So yeah, what is the total available market? How do we make it bigger? But right now, recycled vegetable oil is clean, profitable, sustainable, and it's available. You can go out and do it today. So I've been hearing a little bit of this already, safety and regulatory scrutiny. So you got inputs that are flammable, poisonous, and come in alarming packaging. You should see our owner's menu. And sometimes, they smell awful. So you've got fire marshals, they're starting to worry about who's doing what where, they want some more approvals, you've got to get the fire marshal on board. You've got communities starting to question the safety of the process, which means that in some towns, I know in New Jersey, you can't do this in certain parts of New Jersey. And then you've got the NIMBY attitude is, if you have a power user next door, does the neighbor want 10, 55 grams of recycled vegetable oil ripening in the sun nearby? And then the side streams, which is one of the great euphemisms, need to be managed. Glycerin and wastewater, again, I think there are ways to communicate how to get this done, how to do it safely and non-toxically, and it's something that at Springboard we're looking at trying to figure out sort of a little manual. It's like, here's what you should do when you communicate if you're going to make a lot of fuel. I mean, I think 50 gallons a month is not going to, that's easy to dispose of, but if you're a power user doing 100 gallons every 2 days, and you're coming up with all that glycerin and that wastewater, you need to assure people that you're taking care of it correctly. And certainly in California, we're paying the road tax. Governor Schwarzenegger got busted for not paying the road tax. And so we've got grease hauling fees. I mean, the logistics and the regulators, renders fee.
Not even if they render, you need a hauler.
Yeah,
You do a
there's still,
hauler.
you pay twice if you're a render and a hauler, so it's the same thing, $3,100 per.
But I don't think there's nobody sort of stood up and said, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why should we be doing this when we are sort of spending money to solve a problem that, from a policy perspective, is necessarily getting solved right now? And I think the biggest challenge is education, and the most success we can have as an industry is education, because the more you study it, the more impressive it looks, I think, as a solution, but it does need to be, you do need to educate people who just look at methanol and sulfuric acid and other things like that.
But so how do you get there? Because what's happening is all the regulations is keeping everybody underground.
Correct.
Okay, so if you want to come out from underground,
Yeah,
then
no,
you
you don't
expose
get,
yourself to all the.
what I just heard in the last session, you don't necessarily get any benefit for coming out from underground. What you do is you draw regulatory scrutiny, and then every other person wants to look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, I don't have a silver bullet, but I think that, we're a pretty young industry, and we are making a product that has enough commercial value and enough marketing value, if you will, and we should be able to put together some sort of industry viewpoint on why we need to remove the road tax, why we need to let people make biodiesel in their garage, up to a certain amount of fuel. But, and I don't have a group that you can sign up to yet, but I'm just saying I think we're in a stage on that curve where that would be a logical outcome, or a next step, so that we have people voicing a consistent message to people who are trying to maybe regulate without a lot of information. Grease. Where is it? How do I get it? What does it cost? How can we assure access to it? This is a potential bottleneck. Again, it's not a bottleneck today for anybody who's got a little persistence, but the numbers just suggest that the more successful we are in this will be potentially a problem. So where is it? There's some of my daughter here. She can get as greasy as the best of them, but there's not enough. And so obviously people are going to restaurants, McDonald's being the gold standard. I've seen some great stats about who produces how much grease and where you really shouldn't be eating. You know, the rendering.
Chili's. Chili's is actually worse than McDonald's.
Is it
Jack
really?
in the Box?
Yes.
Jack in the Box is 2.5 times the amount of grease as McDonald's.
I won't eat Chili's anymore after I've taken some of theirs.
Does it work? I mean, does it
It works, it's just, I mean, the average stuff I get from McDonald's, I mean, it all titrates really high, is about 12. The stuff I get from Chili's is like 17 to 20.
Try Dairy Queen.
Yeah. Or at Denny's.
Dairy Queen.
Now, the rendering companies, right, so this industry is directly impacting their way of life, obviously. But they are a big and fragmented industry, it seems to me. They collect a lot of yellow grease. I'm not, you know, my impression is the majority of that they sell abroad and to animal food manufacturers. So they're not using a lot of that for biodiesel. That should change. I think there's probably more bang for the buck if they figure out a way to start creating biodiesel from that. And then commercial animal farms, which I don't think anybody's ever gone out and tried to figure out how many millions of tons of animal fat come from places like Tyson and Hormel and all this, but again, it's a potential.
I looked at an article a year and a half ago where Tyson was hooking it up with Comco.
I'll give you $10 at the end of this. Yeah, no, they're gonna go.
Your turn next.
They're gonna go into,
Diesel.
they're gonna get 2.3 billion pounds of chicken fat in biodiesel fuel.
Yeah,
It's
diesel.
pretty impressive. I mean, it's 300 million gallons potentially coming out of Tyson.
You gotta mix it though, to make it worth it.
Yeah. They're not, I couldn't find, I don't know if you guys have had more luck, but I've not been able to find a lot of studies on how much yellow grease there is out there. And most of the findings that I came upon referenced a guy named George Wilson, who back in 1998 went and looked at 30 metropolitan areas and sort of figured out all these metrics of restaurants per 1,000 people and pounds of yellow grease and brown grease per individual. And this is what he came up with. I don't know if you can see that, but you know, basically per person, per year, 9 pounds, 1.2 gallons of yellow grease and 2.1 gallons of trap grease. He tends to use trap grease and brown grease in the same way. So I'm not 100% sure what that is. But all in all, he's got almost 1 billion gallons of grease available. And biodiesel.org will seconds this number as well. Well, that's a lot of, that's a lot. You know, it's 1/40th of the diesel consumed in the U.S. last year, which is one of the smaller diesel consumers, but it's a start. So I was trying to play some games, mathematics games, and if you say there are 300 to 500 million gallons of grease available to my market, you know, how many biopro processors running 24/7, 365 can you put out into that U.S. only market? And we haven't sold this many yet.
Really?
We're going to get there, but you know, that's a big market. It's not Exxon, but it's a big market, and again, it's a market that creates money. It's a market that creates attention, and it's a market that, you know, rather than waiting for people to tell us what to do, if we have a consistent message, we should start telling people this is how this industry should be managed. So $1.5 to $2.5 billion of alternative energy can be produced from that amount of yellow grease. How do I get it? And I think there's all kinds of classes going on tomorrow about how to get it. Beg, borrow, buy, don't steal. We have seen, I think the main way that people have had success that I've heard of anyways is by offering the service, because the rendering companies are worse than the cable companies. They're not very good at the service, and so if you go and take care of a mom and pop's workspace, then they'll give you the grease. And you know, ultimately, I think our users may well have to buy grease, but I would say the vast majority of our users right now are figuring out ways to get it for free. And these great yellow journalism titles that are in the New York Times and the Financial Times, gets people's attention. So what does it cost here? I just went and picked out a couple of of commodities. You know, a year ago, peanut oil was $4.66, pretty pricey. That's almost $8 a gallon. And the most amazing thing is that yellow grease is almost $3 a gallon if you buy it in a tanker load off the commodities exchange. And that is up from half of that a year, 18 months ago, and 2 years ago it was a quarter of that.
How old is that chart?
The chart is last week. You think it's gone up more?
And
It's
my-
40 cents a pound right
Yeah.
now. So I'm multiplying that by 7.
Okay.
And then brown grease, which I haven't talked a lot about, but we can't do much with that right now. But there are certainly people who can, and at some point we, Springboard, would like to be able to do something with that. And that basically doubles or more than doubles, I think, your potential total available market. Although I think the hardware you need to use for that is probably a little bit different than certainly the BioPro is currently using. And as I said before, the majority of our customers get their grease for free, and that's because this is a non-systematized market. I mean, yeah, there's a price for it, but I don't know anybody who's ever paid that price for it yet.
So the right-hand per gallon price is what we add to your biodiesel cost?
Exactly. So we're at $1.12 now. I think we say on our website $1.25, but we try and use a $5 per gallon methanol average. But again, that's fairly compelling. So how do we assure availability?
Right, how do you differentiate between brown grease and trap grease on that slide?
Trap grease, well, brown grease is sold on commodities exchange. I believe it's got a certain minimum or maximum free fatty acid content. Trap grease isn't sold anywhere I'm aware of. Basically, it's nasty stuff that gets incinerated.
And that includes brown and black and trap grease plus a lot more water generally. So it's rough stuff. I think the trap grease would be.
There's a lot of solids in there.
I visited Philadelphia's biodiesel and saw what they're doing there. You heard of that?
Well, I think that really is a play to get the yellow and the brown based on their services. We've got a company, Blue Sky, who's doing that in California too. So I think it's
So,
more.
you know, the $64 question, how do we assure availability? Because at the end of the day, if we're super successful over the next 10, 15 years, you know, what we don't want to do is push up the price to the price of petroleum, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I, again, don't have the answer, but kicking around various, obviously the co-op model leverages a lot of manpower and therefore collection power and relationship power with restaurants. People who have a lot of restaurant relationships, and maybe there's some sort of economic model where a co-op teams up with 10 restaurants and you have a closed loop cycle. You know, you're a co-op and the restaurants, and you pay the restaurant something, and it all makes sense based on the current price of petroleum. I know a lot of people who are awash in grease. They don't really know how to get rid of it. People don't know how to contact them. It certainly makes sense to me that there should be some sort of maybe auction-like site or some way to put those potential buyers and sellers together. I think that's fairly easy to do, something we're certainly trying to look into.
That could jeoprize the ability of anybody to get free grease anymore, I mean, as well. I mean,
Because there's a price established.
now it's like, oh, now I can easily get
That's true.
a dollar.
Individual restaurant though is not going to get very much back for it. Okay, it's almost not worth their effort. Now,
And then we can increase the supply of grease through technology. Can we work on a broader range or policy that allows the rendering companies to allocate more of what they collect to the biodiesel space at a price below petroleum. And the only thing I'm certain about is that it's a situation that will evolve over the next 1 to 3 years, and that this group, the Biodiesel Collective, and all the users of biodiesel pros and biodiesel processors and people who do it themselves, I think are at a stage over the next 12 months where it makes sense to think about how we communicate a message to the rest of the world. So I was supposed to talk for an hour and 20 minutes, but I just couldn't make it. But I'm open for questions about anything, and yeah.
Do you have any connection or any idea of who would be interested in being a lobbyist for maybe not Springboard, but I don't know, somebody's got to talk for us, and I have no idea who.
Well, I think, you know, again, my background is not political or lobbying, but my sense is there are organizations up and running right now that are focused primarily on the larger commercial scale. We fall into them. And so it's a matter of convincing them, hey, this is actually a much bigger space than we may have historically thought. And here is a set of things we think need to get done that behoove the entire biodiesel community, but specifically the small-scale processor space. And so I am not volunteering, but I'm volunteering Grady. To basically, you know, put together a group of people who are good at this kind of thing and who have the desire and the capability to sort of formulate a message. And, you know, with the amount of money that is potentially awash in the space for the next 5 years, there's a way to, I think, get the message heard through traditional Washington or community channels, political channels.
I think you started a statewide.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have a couple of, we've got a dealer in Virginia who was pretty involved with a state discussion on whether or not to eliminate the road tax. And, you know, spent a fair amount of time, but it wasn't a second job or anything, and at the end of the day, was part of the group that got the state road tax in Virginia repealed. So it's a small step forward. And so it's doable, just need a message, you need
The problem is there's so many agencies to do it above board. That you've got to deal with, it's just a quagmire.
Yeah, anything regulatory, seems.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, you do it in your garage, that's fine, you know, you get caught and you get nailed. And the potential for getting nailed is pretty high. I think
When you
the
get
risk
nailed, what
is
are you
pretty
gonna get
high.
nailed for? I mean, if you don't dump your stuff in a stream and kill a bunch of fish, the fire marshals are upset because you might have 15 gallons of methanol instead of 10.
Yeah.
You know, you might have a goopy compost heap too close to another.
Fire starting my house, I'm doing it in my garage, I got two
Fire marshals not
I
happy.
got 2 things of methanol in it, and it, somebody gets hurt because they're fighting a fire with 2
Yeah,
barrels.
that's
Yeah.
what they're trying to do.
That's life, that's risk.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a risk.
That's a black
That's a
eye.
calculated risk.
Right.
One of the things
It's
that,
possible to put flame lockers and stuff, you know, in your house too, just like you use in industry. It's not that, it's not.
Yeah, but now hold it, I'm talking about just a fire starting somewhere else in my house
Right.
that's involving that, had nothing to do with designing of equipment or whatever. And you know what that's gonna do.
Your homeowners won't kick in.
yeah, your homeowner, no, I have a flammable liquids container that's hazmat approved, and this is an issue that is so variable by state that, you know, I don't know how beneficial it is to even knock it around, because, you know, in New Mexico, we have an environmental department that is strongly pro biodiesel. They offer a free 2-day hazmat training. Once you take that training, you're licensed to handle up to, you know, 2,000 gallons of methanol. You know, it's very, very broad.
Only in your state?
But it's only in New Mexico. So it's a local hazmat handling license, and your state probably has similar things, where your local fire department is gonna look to whatever the state expectation is. And so,
And right now, the state doesn't have a lot of expectations
Right.
around biodiesel because it's new, and so you have people making up responses.
So you've
Yes,
got,
that's what we
you've
have
got
to do.
bureaucrats making decisions
based
based
on limited
on
information.
the worst case situation.
Right,
but
right.
there doesn't know that biodiesel is a flammable.
I think in general,
And so
though,
I guess like
your approach is good to, you know, it's better for us to come up with maybe reactions in a planned way than for the government to, because if we come up with some things and lay them out, we're gonna have a lot better negotiation as a group than the government just saying, look, due to this big major event, we're gonna start imposing some big hairy laws on you.
Right, right.
And it's gonna be a much worse situation for us. I think it's better for it to start here, figure out what's, you know.
For instance, you know, in intra-California, we have all kinds, like each town has a different concern. And so while some fire departments they love biodiesel, they're pro-biodiesel, that, you know, they're very comfortable that they understand and have the wherewithal to deal with the situation if there's a biodiesel processor in a home. Others are completely uncomfortable with it, and so one way to get around that, and one way that one of our customers got around it, was to draw up a blueprint of his garage and where everything was in his garage that was used in the production of biodiesel. Here's where I keep the methanol, here's the locker I keep the other stuff in, and he gave it to the farmers, and the farmers went, okay, when you copy that, that's good, everything's cool. And so he proactively delivered that.
What kind of quantities are you talking about? Are you talking about a 5-gallon jug of methanol? Because they'll do that in that case, but you get quantities to legitimately produce. They're not gonna say,
produce for
okay,
sale.
blueprint.
10 gallons is what he had, 10 gallons of methanol.
And I've seen it vary from city to city in California. Orange
Yeah.
County, it's it's 15, LA, it's 10.
It's not very much.
Yeah, you make a batch and, you know, go buy some more methanol.
But you actually need
Keep it up,
more than
you know.
10 to make a batch, because you got.
The International Fire Code, which is what most cities adopt or defer to, specifies not more than 30. And so talking to fire marshals, at least out where we are, if you've got 30 or less, they're okay. It doesn't give them warm fuzzies, but it meets the code. If you go over that, they can come in and tell you, no, you can't make biodiesel with more than 30 gallons.
So
Because that's
how
the
can
code.
your processor making 100 gallons every 12 hours, how can you live within that scope of that?
And the 20 is tough in the garage. And so you basically have to fill it once.
Go get some more.
And a lot of people are not using it in their garage. I mean, we don't have a lot of freeze in garages anymore.
Okay.
A lot of people put it in barns, or put it in their outbuildings,
Yeah.
put it in commercial space. I think you might have a problem right now in California doing it in a garage.
What has been your experience with zoning requirements? In other words,
Very.
say you were a business owner, and you were in a mixed-use environment, would you potentially be looking at moving to an industrial environment? Or
This is great. You should talk to Toby Duncan, who's at one of our dealers in Oxnard, who's a power, he has 4 of the 380s. And he's mixed use now, so he's had some interesting interactions with the community and the fire marshals.
We used to be in mixed use, and we decided to move to industrial simply because I was spending so much time dealing with all the neighbors in that mixed use, and I mean, it just wasn't worth it, you know?
What is zoned? What is it zoned as?
Oh, what we're in now is zoned, it's a manufacturing zone. It's,
Yeah, but there's even levels of
well,
that.
we're in M1, but
Yeah.
we're renting from an auto body shop because they're they're handling the same kinds of chemicals as we are, basically.
They'd never let us do that in the county.
Is this Toby guy, where does he live?
He's here. He's in Oxnard, California.
Okay, so no, I'm saying he's not, like, he's in California. 'cause I'm
He's
saying-
north of LA?
What the law is.
You're in Denver?
You guys are
called Denver Fire
You
Department.
guys are
Yeah.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah, well,
I couldn't.
can you think of a better place in Southern California?
For what? Look at what?
Just for personal processing.
So, okay, so you told them I'm doing personal processing, and they said, good luck, buddy.
Great, knock yourself out. Yeah, they were really.
Did you get this right? Did you get the guy's name?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
glad I
did.
moved out.
Yeah, I did. You want to do it, right?
He was really into it, and I sent him to the websites and
So
all the
I could
education.
talk to you about
and he
some
was like,
Contact information?
Yeah, yeah, I
You-
just, hey,
Also, if you
So
want,
get that right.
I like your idea of finding
you
someplace.
know what, I ended up having to move, so
Okay.
I need to, because I told him I was
Because
gonna
when
do
push
exactly
comes
what
to
you
shove.
said, is just lay it out and say,
Right.
this is where all the equipment, this is where everything is, just in case something goes wrong here and you end up showing up with all your guys, so you know where everything
Was
is.
that, did it work?
I ended up moving from that location, now I'm in another location, I gotta start over again.
Just a-
I'm sure there's a ton of horror stories,
Well-
but I know a company that's starting up in San Diego. They paid $5,000 to have a review with the fire people. Okay? They said, okay, you put in sprinkler system, regular water, they okayed it. Then there was a problem in San Marcos where a guy burned himself up and died.
Yeah, I read about that one.
Okay, and he was in a light industrial area and had 5 years' experience making, but really not running it well, okay.
Manny
They came
Vega.
back in, they told him, oh, water's not gonna work, you're gonna have to go to, yeah. Actually, they said foam. I don't know.
$200,000.
Yeah, it took, well, not just that, but it cost them 3 months in construction to redesign it.
Just
So
some,
this is, I mean, this is.
just some tips for you.
Okay?
Let's not,
If you go to biodieseltutorial.com, there's a great article. Pardon?
It's on our website too, if you want to look at
What's that?
it. The stealth machine.
Oh,
The SR-72?
ESP 100 right now. We're open to suggestions, bunch of creative.
Put some fins on it called the SR-72.
Biodieseltutorial.com has an article by a guy from a fire department that will give you tips on how to approach your fire department. It's called Biodiesel Safety, and he just lays out some very, very great ways to approach your fire department. So I highly recommend it.
And that may be where I got the information to contact mine.
Yeah.
It worked out really well wherever I got it from.
They were totally all about it.
So that's 12 hours from start to the gas tank?
How much was he making?
Yeah.
Producing?
So seriously, when?
I don't know. His name was
Couple months.
As soon as I can get it, believe me, I'm not trying to sit on it, but it's basically like it's a prototype. There are a couple of things that need to change a little bit. But the goal in-house is to get it out before the end of the calendar.
so you've got another column in spare,
Excuse me?
you got another column in spare.
You bet, yeah, yeah.
that's the lead
I can
on
tell you
that.
that it was in polytank. That's one of the reasons
Yeah,
I
they've
like
got another
polytank.
column as well.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
That's why I like these.
And what is the price roughly?
Sub
The
10.
price is gonna have a great return on investment. So,
What a marketer!
You just said sub 10, now you're taking it back.
So, $10.
that'd be pretty good, yeah. You know, it's gonna be, it will reflect the fact that you're making a lot more money as a month. But right now, because it's a prototype, it's been put together by.
So you should be
Gold
giving these
ink
out
and-
in order to gain the market for the prototype. You should be giving these out to gain your market share for your prototype.
Yes.
You might have made a version now, so.
Why you didn't want to
Exactly.
go.
You're gonna be arrested for that.
Methanol.
But it's exciting, we're excited about this product.
Yeah.
And we're thinking we'll be able to-
It's not bad.
I am offering my services to test your prototype.
Good, okay. Send me an email.
See, if he can do it, any idiot can run it.
Can are you doing a slideshow with the group so that people can see this?
Yeah. Happy to do that.
All right.
Well, this PowerPoint will be on the website.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to get into the organization.
Yeah, okay.
So are you guys still making those in,
Chico, California.
really? We're gonna set it on,
If you'd like one, let us know. I'd be happy to help you get one.
just live theoretically down the street, so. San Diego.
It's on the street. No, I live down the street.
You missed,
San Diego's not down
you
the
missed
street.
the word, theoretical.
Oh.
You guys, from here on out, we're dinner till about 7. If you come back at 7, we've got a general public session. It's going to be a really good one. We've got a lot of